your former teams are really kind of in a little limbo, probably more so, I think, over, you know, what's going to happen, not only just in the Premier League, but in the Championship as well. So you've got Liverpool, former team, with yourself, you know, in advance, the league's going to continue. That's what's kind of been said from UEFA. You've got Aston Villa, you know, battling for that relegation, and then you've got Leeds United and they won the Championship, and wondering what's going to happen with, obviously, with the Football League as well. So, you know, what's your kind of take on that, Stephen, with the leagues going forward?
For me, everything has to finish. When you think of a film trilogy or a trilogy of books, you don't read 3/4 of the way through the first book, or watch 3/4 of the way through the first film and jump onto the next book. That's the way it is when you think of the season. You're almost trying to finish a season, start another one without actually completing the first season or the previous season. It doesn't make any sense to me. There's no time frame on when the season will start again. There doesn't have to be a time frame on when it finishes, because there doesn't have to be a time frame on when next season starts, if that makes sense. So for me, the most important thing is to find out who the winners are, who the losers are. That's what has to be done. That's what sport's about. It's finding the winners and the losers. And for me, that's why it needs to be completed, the season. And I don't agree with what the Belgian league have done, where they've finished their season and crowned their champions already. I think that's an easy way out. It's probably caused a lot of problems as well. But I think everything needs to be finished. When you think of the Championship alone and what's at stake, Leeds are in a position now where, they're in a great position of being top of the league and or in the automatic promotion places, but so much is to play for. And to be in that close to being a Premier League team after so long away from the Premier League, to suddenly just make a decision, well, we're not going to promote any teams and we're not going to relegate any teams. Teams deserve to be relegated because they were either not managed or coached properly, they didn't buy well within the Championship, or they simply, in the Premier League, or they simply were not good enough. Why should they stay within the Premier League for them faults? And another team who's been superb, or another three teams in the Championship who've been superb for a long, more games within the season, don't deserve to then be promoted. For me, again, it needs sorting out.
And again, you look at the Championship in particular, and you know, we all know how hard that league is to kind of get out of. And Leeds were in a similar situation to where they were probably at the same time last season, but didn't go up. I know they were starting to kind of fall away from the back end. So I think in the Championship even more so, there's still a lot of games to kind of get through, and like anything can happen. And
there's so much to play for. I mean, if you go on a great run towards the end of the season, you look at Aston Villa last season, they won 11 games on the spin. Suddenly they got held into the playoff places where no one gave them a chance. And there's teams that will be thinking that now, where they can go on a great run, depending on how fit they come back and what have you. Leeds could easily drop out of it. So could West Brom. Fulham could be suddenly propelled into it. There's so much to play for and so much to happen, is that it has to be played. You can't just go on form of what happened during the season and, Leeds were good enough to go up or West Brom were good enough. There's so much, the Championship's so competitive and so up and down, is that there's so much more that can happen. One of my other former clubs, I look at Wigan, they were dead and buried 4 or 5 weeks ago. Then they go on this great run, propel themselves out of the relegation places, and suddenly they need the season to continue. They want to, they'll probably look at it now and go, well, it'd be great if it did end, but it can't happen because someone else in the bottom three could go on that run again and they could get dragged back into it. There's so much that can happen. So, it's one of them situations that does need sorting. I think the biggest concern from English football's point of view is that we're going to see clubs go bankrupt. I think that's the biggest worry. And that's my concern, is that if it doesn't start up soon, is there a sort of a safety blanket for them clubs where people are going to help them out? They're going to fund them for a while if that's what's needed. But that's the biggest concern. that I'm hearing is that there's a lot of clubs in trouble.
And when you talk about clubs, just think about the knock-on effect that's going to have within them clubs. You know, you talk with the staff, the fans, the academies, the pathways. You know, from you've only got to look at someone like Berry. You know, from last year. You know, 150 academy players. You know, released and kind of free to kind of go wherever it's. I think, you know, when you see situations, I think people have got to kind of take into context the bigger picture, not just, well, it's the first team and it's just going to be, it's only going to, you know, matter first team players, coaching staff around first team and so on. It's the bigger volume that's connected with those clubs as well. That's the fear as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's huge. There's so much at stake. It's almost like when we look at teams that get relegated from either the Premiership to the Championship or Championship lower, there's always a knock-on effect. There's always jobs affected by it. More often than not, it's the staff within the club. It's not really the players. Players will usually be sold to try and make up that difference of money and try and recuperate some money. But there's no opportunity to do that here. There's no money. There's no income stream coming in at all. There's only expenditure. There's only money going out every day, every week, every month. But there's nothing coming in to top that up. So that's the biggest concern. I fear for a lot of people who are in that situation where they're not working, they're not getting paid, they're on furlough. But then if the club goes into administration or goes bankrupt, then that disappears. And it's worrying times. It really is, and that's where, as much as it's difficult for the big clubs as well, because they live within their means as well, they need to look after these so-called smaller clubs because they're the future of the game as well. We look at how many players that played in the World Cup for England and the Euros in the last couple of years have been on loan to those so-called smaller clubs, them feeder clubs. How many of those players were actually playing at those smaller clubs as well throughout the years and then worked themselves up into the Premier League? Everyone always talks about Jamie Vardy being the player who sort of went from rags to riches and worked his way through the leagues. We're seeing it so much more now, where there's so many players. Think of James Maddison, who's also at Leicester, and he was at Coventry, then worked his way into Norwich, then worked his way up again to Leicester. These are all situations where we potentially could lose these clubs that are nurturing players for the future as well.